Welcome to Figments on Reality. I'm Dan Leaf. I go by Fig, and it's August 9th, 2024. In Figments on Reality, we like to talk about matters that matter and quickly address issues that I think you should be concerned about and areas where I have recommendations because I don't want to just do problem identification. Let me emphasize that Figments on Reality does its very best to be non political. I have political views, but they're A, none of your business, and B, I don't want to color my arguments by choosing political sides. So even though today's episode is about a political topic, I'm not going to choose sides. I'm going to talk about process and democracy. So the topic is this is no way to pick a Veep. Specifically, I'm going to talk about how we choose our candidates for vice president and why I think it should change. The bottom line is, I think it should change because it's not very democratic. The two candidates for vice president have recently been identified. On the left, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, and on the right, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Okay. The one thing I know is that none of you, yes, unless you live in one of those two states, has gotten to vote for these two candidates for vice president. Okay? There was no role for you in the competitive selection of the vice presidential candidates. They were apparently both chosen by their respective candidates, Vance by former President Trump and Walz by Vice President Kamala Harris. And who knows why they were picked. You can hear a lot of different reasons because they'll deliver a state in the election, because they're compatible, because of their views, because who knows. There's plenty to like and not like about each, but it's that selection that I really don't like. And it's been a long time since there was direct involvement in the voters in determining who would be the candidates for vice president. How long, you ask? Since 1804. I didn't vote in that election, but I know that Aaron Burr was our last vice president who came to the office based on being the runner up in the presidential election. That changed with the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. That was no longer the way to choose the vice president, and slates have been named by the political parties. That's been done in a variety of ways, but none of them are truly competitive, and none of them involve you, the voter, or even your delegates directly. In fact, the last time that a presidential candidate was selected at the convention by delegates was 1956. I was 4 years old. Go ahead and do the math, but I just think that's a bad way to do business. And I think that the office of vice president is too important in a variety of ways to leave it to that. So, why do I think the office is important? Well, because that's where we get a lot of future presidents. 15 vice presidents have gone on to become president through a variety of ways. We've had pretty interesting vice presidents in my lifetime. If you go down the list, Spiro Agnew, Dan Quayle, Al Gore, Joe Biden, George Herbert Walker Bush, Mike Pence, and now Kamala Harris running for the office. Uh, if they're going to be on the fast track to president, and a couple of those did become president, then there should be a competitive selection that involves we, the people, before they're anointed by political insiders. That's how I view it. The vice president is significant, and not just because of succession. We tend to see them in their official role. How visible are they? Sometimes they're pretty not visible, invisible, stealthy, not trusted with anything but state funerals. But they still have roles that are immutable, regardless of their public image. And that's part of the reason I think we should competitively select them. The office's significance does come from its official representation and the potential for succession or subsequent election as president. But there are some specific roles that, regardless of the relationship with their boss, the president, are going to be theirs. They will be the president of the Senate. And in that role, they will cast tie breaking votes in the event of a Senate deadlock. That's happened 31 times, folks, for Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, that depends on the makeup of the Senate, but that's a lot of potential impact for somebody who is simply named a running mate. Okay? Not judging, just saying we should have a vote. They also preside over as president of the Senate, over impeachment proceedings for federal officials. That could be pretty important, and there has been some impeachment activity in the past. Well, again, should be part and parcel of our democratic process, not an insider trading deal. The They do provide advice and counsel to the president. That varies based on the relationship and how and why they were chosen. If they're chosen to be a silent partner, maybe not as much, but they'll still be there. So if those are the significant elements of the office, then why do I think change is necessary other than simply to be democratic? That, in and of itself, in my mind, is enough. It shouldn't be solely in the hands of political insiders. I do think that by driving somebody that the presidential candidate picks by hand, whatever criteria they might use, is more likely than not to build division between the two parties. Insiders closely aligned with the president, an opponent who picks someone closely aligned with that opponent. We're creating gaps, not building territory for compromise and for collaborative government, which I think we could certainly use. Additionally, the current process, arbitrary and capricious as it is, doesn't involve any element of competition in the selection and development of future presidents. If a vice president is likely to be in the running on the fast track rather, for president, they should be subject to some national competition and national vetting. Now, both Senator Vance and Governor Walz have had some less than positive disclosures since their naming as candidates. I'm not going to judge those, but folks, if they had been vetted through a competitive selection process, those wouldn't just be coming out now. We would have gotten through that and we could talk about the issues. And again, the bottom line for motivation for me is the lack of diversity of thought in an administration. Like a group of like-minded people is more likely to make a bad decision. That's all. Yet another episode of Figments we'll get to at another time. But I think these are all reasons to change. How could we change? What could happen differently? I think there's a way. I'm not particularly optimistic that we'll find that path, but I'm going to ask the two major political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, to think about democracy, put democracy first, and then implement one of these methods. First, they have to agree, because one side doing it won't work. They have to both agree to make the selection of vice presidential candidates part of the party convention. Make that the process. And then there'd be two basic ways. There may be others that I can think of doing that. Take the vote getters 2 through 6, or delegate getters at the convention. In other words, the presidential candidate obviously got the most delegates. Well, take the next two, and if there are that many, through 6, to give five folks to be considered as vice presidential candidates, and then fight it out in whatever process you define. Or, and this may be a more likely, more manageable path, develop a specific competitive path for candidates for vice president. Everybody doesn't have to run for president. In the election cycle, we see a lot of folks who enter the race, and you kind of go, no way. And there might be no way from lack of experience or name recognition or whatever. But an alternative would be for them to enter a path specifically designed to lead to the competition to become the vice presidential candidate. I think that's a reasonable and achievable way to do it. And I think it's important. Our democracy needs more democracy, and our country needs better governance. And that's not a political view. That's a personal but very practical view. So thanks for watching Figments on Reality. Please look for more episodes. And for episodes of the lighter hearted version, Figments, The Power of Imagination, on the Phase Minus One YouTube channel. Drop me a note if you have anything you'd like me to address, or you just want to tell me what to think, or leave a comment below. And while you're looking below at the comments list, please click subscribe so you'll know what's coming up on the Phase Minus One YouTube channel. And I'd really appreciate it if you'd click like, because it just makes me feel good. So please join me next time for Figments on Reality.